Today we're going to look at a code solution from the free response exam from 2013, and it's question for SkyView. Alright, so first of all, everybody please go to my course website and go to the tab free response questions. You can download two files. So first of all, make sure you have this CSA 2013 PDF that has the question in it. And then the other file you're going to need is the sky.zip. Okay, so once you have those two files, you can go ahead and take a look at the question. So here's a PDF, and we're going to do question 4. So this one is rather interesting because it involves the use of a two-dimensional array. So this is one of the big things that the AP Computer Science question designers have done, is that they tend to like this kind of a question. It tends to be a standard question that's given in generally every exam from here on out. So it's a good idea to get practice on this. Okay, so you guys can go ahead and read through the question on your own and make sure you understand it, because I'm just going to go through the code solution on this. All right, so here's the BlueJ project file, and I've opened up this SkyView file here, and we're going to go ahead and do the part A. So just remembering what the question mentioned, it said that in part A you have to write the constructor. So this is a bit of a departure from what they usually request. So usually in a lot of these questions they'll say, oh, okay, just write a method and then write some other method. But occasionally they do require you to write a constructor. So you have to be very careful, because this involves different sort of things you have to do. Okay, so let's see what they want. So just looking through this question, say you have a one-dimensional array, and that contains telescope data. And what they really want you to do is go across each element in this one-dimensional array and put it into a two-dimensional array. So that's pretty straightforward, but there's a little twist. So they want you to do it in telescope order. So I suppose when you have this row, it goes from left to right, and then the next row goes from right to left, and then so on and so forth. So you're doing this kind of reversal every time you go through a different row. So we'll see how that's done. It's actually not that hard. Okay, so I'm going to write the code here. So the first thing I need to do is initialize this view two-dimensional array. So I see that it's already declared. So the only thing I need to do is initialize it. So it's going to go like this. So view gets new double, right? And then I just need to figure out how many rows and how many columns it's going to have. So this is actually mentioned in these two parameters. So I just have to type in num rows and then num cols. All right, so I've got my two-dimensional array set up. Now, really, what I have to do is loop through this one-dimensional array, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to make another variable. So I think I'll call it position, POS, so int position, so start at 0, and then I just go through it, so loop through this in turn, and then pull out every element and put into this two-dimensional array. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me loop across that two-dimensional array called view. So I'm just going to do it in the standard way to show you exactly what happens. So for int, I'm going to call it row. Row gets 0, row less than view.length, row plus plus. All right, so that's going to loop me across the rows. So this is where the interesting thing comes in, because now I'm going to have to loop across columns. So I'm going to do it in the usual way. Let's just see what happens when I loop across the columns, just all going from left to right. So it's going to look like this. So int col gets 0, col less than view0.length. So view 0 is the first row. Col plus plus. Okay, so that's the standard way of looping across a two-dimensional array. So you should have that memorized. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to go through and pull out the element in the scan and then put it in to this two-dimensional array. So it's going to be view row col. There's the element, get, and then scanned And then, I made this variable POS position, so I'm going to pull that out. Okay, so it gets pulled out of the one-dimensional array and gets put into the subsequent position in the two-dimensional array. Okay, but we're not quite done because I need to increment position. Okay, so that's going to loop me across this two-dimensional array. So let's just go ahead and compile and run. I know it's not going to work. Do I get an error? Oh, and I remember, yeah. So get average, we actually need to return 0.0 because otherwise it will not compile. Okay, so let me run this test. Yeah, I think that's incorrect, but let me go ahead and check it against the question. So it should wind up looking like, yeah, 0.3, 0.7, 0.8 is correct. However, see that 0.4, 1.4, 1.1, you can see that that's incorrectly done. 0.2, 0.5, 0.1 is correct, and then 1.6, 0.6, 0.9. See, that's opposite. So it seems to me that anytime the row is at index 0 or 2, it's fine. However, when it's index 1 or 3 or so on, it's not fine. Okay, so that's a big clue there. So it seems to me that when the rows are even, we should be going in the forward direction, the usual direction. However, when the rows are odd, we need to be going in the opposite direction. So let me make conditional here, right? So you say, all right, well, if the row happens to be even, so row percentage 2 equals 0, then we do go in this forward manner. Okay, so let me, I hate when that happens. Okay, so I'm just cleaning up the code a bit to make it easy. Now, I'm going to put an else in here, and I can essentially do this code. So I'm actually going to copy this over because this code is pretty much the same. Okay, so we're essentially doing that, but we need to do it in the opposite way. So now you need to loop in the opposite direction. So instead of starting at 0, I start at view 0.length -1. Okay, and then rather than this being my ending point, I say call greater than or equal to 0, call -. This is a standard way that you loop backwards across something. It's something that you should really memorize. Okay, so let's compile and let's see if this works. I think that's much better. I think I remember that it's 1.1 and 0.9, 1.6. Okay, so let me go ahead and run the test bench. And I see that 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 do work. I remember those are the test cases for part A. The others are the test cases for part B, and I see they're coming out wrong. So we'll work on that. Okay, so there's the code for part A, and you can scroll back and pause the video and take a look at this. So let's go ahead and do part B, and that involves getting an average. So let's see what that's about. Okay, so now we got to write this get average in which they set or they section off a particular box consisting of starting at start row, ending at end row, and then starting at start call, ending at end call. Take all those elements and figure out the average. So it looks to me like we're going to have to read the elements and then count up how many there are. Take the the one divided by the other, and that's your average. Okay, so this is going to be pretty straightforward. So I've got my view two-dimensional array set up, so I just have to loop across these things, and all I really have to do is just figure out sum and then the count. Okay, so let me make a variable here called sum. It's a double, so I'll put 0.0 and then int count. All right, so now I got to loop across this view two-dimensional array. So let me go ahead and do that for int row get. So you may be tempted to start from 0, but recall they want you to loop across a particular section. We're starting at start row. Start row. row less than or equal to end row, right? Because it's inclusive, row plus plus. All right, so that gives me my rows. And so the columns are going to be very similar. So for int call gets, and then we start at start call. Call less than or equal to end call, right? Again, it's inclusive, call plus plus. Okay, so that loops us across that section that's specified by start row, start call, etc. So now I've got to pull out elements and put them into sum. So it's going to be sum plus equals view row call. Right, so that pulls out elements and then it sums them up. And then, you know, for every element I have to count them, so count plus plus. Okay, so that takes care of the looping part. Now we just have to figure out the average. So it's pretty easy. You just do, you know, sum divide by count. So return sum by count. Okay, so that will give me an average. All right, let's go ahead and compile. So hit compile, make sure there's no errors. And let me go here. So I'm going to run this. So let me just see what I get here. 0.8, I think that's right. I think they do say that it's 0.8, and they do. So that's good. And then there's just one more step. And since I do have a JUnit test bench here, so let me go ahead and run tests. And I see I have all 10 test cases coming out correct. Okay, so that's good news. That means my code is fine. All right, so that means the question for SkyView is complete. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.